I will show you how to set up quick and simple views from your 3D model. Finding the most promising viewpoints and compositions for your project is the first stage in creating successful images. The aim is to output a quick selection of drafts and produce a matrix to help you decide which images best represent your project. And in the end, you may only have time to produce a couple of final images if you're aiming for a high standard, so you need to choose these carefully. I usually use my GPU graphics card to render out live previews, so I can walk through the building and experience it interactively. If you don't have an RTX graphics card, you can use CUDA. And if you don't have a powerful graphics card, then use CPU. But you can't do the live preview thing, but you just render them out once you've set them up. I turn my quality right down. I use the NVIDIA AI to render, and I've set up my resolution to quite low, so I get a little preview. I mean, this could be a little bit higher, but just for sake of this presentation. But I wouldn't have it too detailed at this stage. And often you can actually see quite well on even a small image if the setup has potential or not. So whilst this is loading up, I'll just show you Nathan's model here. In many ways, quite a typical model in that he modeled the whole building. Actually, he's got this one missing. So he modeled the whole building, but the detail sort of varies. Some may still be at a sort of massing stage, and others are much more detailed, like this area here. But then certain junctions haven't sort of been designed or infilled yet, and there's some gaps and so on, which is quite normal. And in a way, you may not necessarily want to spend time to you might do, but you may not necessarily want to spend time modeling your whole building in detail. And so if you've made decisions on which viewpoints you want to take forward, then you just spend time refining what you can see and leave the rest be. So I've now got my live preview here, and you notice that this is quite dark. So a quite useful setting is to just turn this to auto. Later on you might change this, but as we're moving between spaces, auto allows you to adjust the compensation based on the exposure based on where you are. I will stop it down by a little bit so it's not quite so bright. But basically, if I now move outside, it will automatically adjust my exposure to put this in the right light. Now, the problem is with this model, say this was a sort of earlier model, it doesn't have all the materials applied. And so a quick way would be to just override the material to a plain white material like this. And you can, this is in your render settings, and you can select a material, and I have this generic bright, which is just an off-white basic V-Ray material to override your model. So now any errors that you may have made in texturing will disappear. Now you notice that the glass has been included in this override, but in the material setting, and if I go to my glass window material, can be overridden. If I untick this, it's now excluding itself from this override and is visible and to the light, and so now this gives you a better view. Right. The next thing is you can now use this setup to explore your views. Now we notice there's a big kind of hole back here in the model, and it's worth just spending a couple of minutes to fill these holes in, just because V-Ray is a physical rendering engine. It will make a difference to to the lighting in your scenes if there's big gaps like this. So if I like a view like this one, I save it out here in my name views. I click the little plus, and actually I need to select the view there and select the little plus, and then I can save this view to my matrix of views here, and I can organize them and name them so I know where I am. So I set this one up earlier. And now here you notice this area is quite dark, and this might be a little distracting in your view. So we can just maybe allow some light in. Yeah, so this is better. Or I can fine tweak my cameras like so. If I camera plural, and I can show my camera here, and now I can adjust it accordingly. And if you wanted to sort of fine tweak it, you can just move it. You might want to show more of the floor below. There's something in here you can hide. And so get these views set up, save them out, and work your way through your model. Now, one thing we were sort of looking at with Nathan's project was that his part of his inspiration was these skin and prosthetic elements, as it was a prosthetics lab and workshop, and he had these balloons that he was looking at early on. And so even for this sort of early stage of the project, we thought it'd be quite interesting to make an override material that would give you a better, more atmospheric result. So he made this plastic kind of concrete material that's more skin-like in its sort of texture. So if I apply this now to this model, things start to be a bit more interesting, and you get more reflections and other things. And it's in many ways an unrealistic material, but it kind of makes that early stage more intriguing. It also has an impact on your render time. So in my virtual frame buffer, I have these layers. So I have filmic tone map always there because it adjusts my 32-bit image in terms of its brightness level across the spectrum, and so you can kind of improve it like this. You can also, and maybe this is quite desirable early on, is to turn your saturation off. I mean, this is quite desaturated anyway, as I've overridden it with the plain material, but it might be useful to just work in black and white and take color out of the equation until later. The other thing to note about this model is that I have lit it with a evening HDRI sky dome, and if I rotate this around, the direct light falling in through the roof light has quite a strong impact on the view. So in some ways, if you're looking at composition, you do want to work with a more neutral setup, unless, say, in the Helen Binet example that I showed you earlier, the direct light is the composition. It's a key element. Therefore, the way it's set up has to be there from the first step. But if that's not the case, which probably might be the case in most instances, then it's sort of undesirable to have this. So use a overcast sky or something else that just allows you to see it a more neutral light. So what you can do is you can, of course, save your named views here, so you have a record of where you were, and then here you can save out your history. As you're going through it, you can kind of save it there, then move on to the next view, or whichever one that is. Move on to the next view, adjust it, and save it as your name view, and then you can copy another one. And then these views you can save out individually, or you can later on, once I stop this, you can access all of these, and you can adjust them in the frame buffer as well. So then at the end, you should have a nice mix of different views, and you can weigh them up against each other. So for instance, here, in the end, the view that was focusing in on the entrance was chosen because it just draws you in a lot more, and the kind of constellation between all these different elements here was more visible, whereas maybe in the faraway view, this sort of front piece here was quite dominant, and actually the more interesting bit in the background was hidden. So it's these kinds of decisions that you have to make as part of this process. But in a way, it's good to have these rendered out and to see it, without being in 3D, because you can sit there much calmer and think about it, rather than always sort of spinning around and looking at everything in motion. Okay, thank you. Just to add one final thing, and I mentioned that you may not be able to render with your graphics card, but you want to render with CPU. So at the end, once you've made your selection of all your views, you can set up a batch render here, and if you press the little plus here at the bottom, you can load all your views into your list. You can deselect the ones that you don't want to render. You check your settings here and the quality that you think you can afford. You can also, if you want to have certainty, you can put a time limit into these. So you say, well, each one should take 15 minutes, so 3 hours, and it'll all be done. And you can render these out, and it will save them in a folder for you. Yeah.